These people aren't like fascists. They are fascists. So at this point, I don't want to hear any talk from Republicans about, oh no, guys, we just have simple disagreements. Republicans are ugly, they're immoral, and they're fascist. I don't want anything to do with them. That's the reality of what Republicans are today in America.
Well, that escalated quickly. Is he going to say why Republicans are fascist? Nope, he's just going to allude to some vague media story that people can't recognize anymore because it was too long ago. So basically, this is just a 1 minute short of the Young Turks owner and horse enthusiast, Cenk Uygur, calling his political opponents evil with no explanation. Is it any wonder why the modern left is becoming more and more a synonym for the word violence, especially after watching every reasonable person flee that party or get ousted for not being far left enough? But the way we got here is not a mystery. In fact, I think a lot of the progression towards radicalism is quite intentional. Speaking of the Young Turks, allow me to introduce you to former employee Jimmy Dore, telling the Young Turks audience to assault cops.
When you're around cops, right, you're like, oh, you want to be like compliant, right? But at the same time, if you don't know they're going to slam your head into a car or something, like you don't want to be so compliant.
Right.
Like, so when do I fight them? When do I give a little resistance?
I've watched enough body cam footage to know that almost every time someone's having a bad experience with the police is because they were violently resisting arrest after breaking the law. So his advice to be extra confrontational towards the police instead of being assertive and polite is going to get people killed. Now, in this specific case that Jimmy was talking about, the officer was in the wrong and self-defense would have been justified. But the issue here is that he applies this advice generally to police encounters while suggesting with no evidence that the woman they're talking about in the last clip was assaulted by the officer because she was black.
But what's wrong with this guy? Is it like a power thing? Is it roid rage? Is it something like weirdly sexual?
I would guess the woman was not white who he did this to.
Oh.
This was said in 2013, around the time that BLM started. Non-white means black because those were the types of videos that were going viral during that period. So the suggestion is that the officer attacked a woman for being black, and he made this assertion with no evidence. She was white. And the problem is that when you make this kind of assertion on a topic that's already been heated since Rodney King in the 90s, followed by saying that you should be violent towards police officers, you're going to inspire certain people to take action. Which brings us to this guy, Gavin Long, who is a fan of the Young Turks and killed 4 police officers. Before the shooting, Gavin had uploaded reaction videos to content from the Young Turks, one of them being where Jimmy Dore said this in response to a police dispute that actually involved a black woman this time, who was being arrested.
I don't know what I would do in that situation. So if you go over and you confront the cops, which you would do in any other situation if they weren't cops.
That's right.
Yeah. In any other situation, if there were 2 grown men pouncing on a woman who is pregnant and she's screaming and she's not a threat to anybody, you would go over there and you would start by punching those guys. That's how you would start.
Hey, retard, in this hypothetical example where you're the hero, do you know any of the context before you start acting? Are you saying that people should beat up cops because they hear a woman shouting? What if she had a gun and was threatening people? What if she was screaming things that were untrue to garner sympathy from bystanders? Criminals do that all the time, so telling people to assault cops based on small amounts of information that they would realistically have in a situation like this is incredibly irresponsible. The full context is on screen for those who care, but basically a pregnant black woman was put face down on her stomach and put in handcuffs for failing to identify. The baby ended up being fine when she was born, but why was this woman put into that position? Well, it's because she was resisting arrest. Yes, the arrest was unlawful because in California you don't have to identify in that specific context. However, instead of educating people on how stupid it is to resist arrest unless your life is in danger, even if that arrest is unlawful, Jimmy suggests that basically all cops are racist and you should be violently hostile towards them.
He had no reason to arrest her.
And she's not going anywhere.
That's not true. If you watch the footage, you can see her walking away from the police.
He already said there wasn't a crime that was committed, yet you are black, and I'm a little pissed off that you're not doing exactly what I said. So I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to brutalize you right now in public in front of a school. I don't give a fuck because I'm a cop, and that's why I became a cop, because I'm not a big thinker, and I like brutality.
For one, Jimmy fails to mention that the white lady said someone else witnessed the black girl punching her car and violently screaming at her, so the black lady might have lucked out with an unlawful arrest for failure to identify. She could have very well been guilty, and that might be the actual reason for why she was resisting. More importantly, and I withheld this information from earlier for dramatic effect, but if you go frame by frame on the body cam footage, which the Young Turks should know to do, they're a news organization, but if you go frame by frame, you can see the pregnant black lady is actually put on her side, not her stomach. She's on her side the whole time. So while this arrest was technically unlawful, the cops, in fact, were not trying to beat her up. The way the Young Turks reported this story, followed by their conclusion about cops, is actually kind of evil.
People who join the police like brutality. That's why they're cops. They dig this shit. Those cops are brutal maniacs.
Whether she was guilty of a crime or not, if the cops are engaged in an unlawful arrest, do not resist unless your life is in danger. Assert your rights and then punish them in court, not on the street. Going back to Gavin Long, in response to these Jimmy Dore clips, you can see the Young Turks fan is repeating the same rhetoric that Jimmy said, while also saying that he will beat up cops, as the Young Turks segment he is reacting to is being reflected on his glasses.
By the way, there's nothing to de-escalate. Nothing's happened. They come in, they escalate.
The cops came in. You're supposed to be the de-escalator. You came in and escalated the situation.
What if they started punching her?
They didn't punch her, though. Even though the arrest was unlawful, they used minimum force considering the circumstances.
What if they started punching her?
Right, then
So you just let it go?
I don't know, what would you
At
do?
what point do you step in?
I'm not sitting and watching.
I don't know what
And
I
then
would
hand it
do.
to him.
I don't know what I would do.
I will open my trunk and get a tire iron and then call my dad.
And he says he'll get the tire iron. I don't know what I'll do, but I'm not sitting and watching. I would have came through. I would have not complied. I would have died by protecting that woman.
Protect her from what? All they did was put her in handcuffs. She wasn't in any danger, despite the Young Turks deliberately trying to make their audience believe she was being beat up for being black. It's like he's being programmed and he'll act in whatever way they tell him. Also, if you watch Actual Justice Warrior's video on it, you can see him saying some schizo stuff about race. So the fact that the Young Turks are pointing out that she was black and then accusing the cops of being racist when there's no evidence of it is important. Two cops not knowing the law about identification in California and arresting someone for it is not racism. It's them being idiots, and it's something they should be punished for, but the evidence that it was racially motivated is entirely speculation from the Young Turks. The only racism that came out of this situation was from the black lady herself.
She just called the police for whatever reason, I don't know.
Well, some people just feel like sometimes they're,
okay, well, I just feel threatened by her because she's white.
Was that?
If she's white and she's making threats to me, I felt threatened by her.
So the Young Turks saying that this was a racist attack and titling their video, "She's pregnant and black, they're cops, you know how this ends," followed by telling their audience to assault cops is problematic because everyone has people like Gavin Long in their audience, some more than others.
Yeah, I was also a Nation of Islam member.
Some, actually a lot more than others, which is why you don't encourage violence when you speak publicly. Young Turks fan Gavin Long went on to ambush and shoot 6 police officers, killing 4 of them about 2 weeks after the death of Alton Sterling, who lived in the same community. Alton Sterling was yet another black man who would still be alive if he had followed police orders.
If you want to make it out of a situation safely and alive, listen to the officer's commands.
Contrary to what TYT's Jimmy Dore might say, a quick trip to the station is not worth your life.
Gavin Long was directly inspired by the Young Turks. Gavin Long made reaction videos to Young Turks videos about the police. There were calls for violence in those Young Turks videos. He had a specific affinity for protecting black women in his mind. And one of those videos in particular was a video where the Young Turks baselessly speculated that a woman slammed by the police was in fact slammed because she was a black woman, even though in reality, she was a white woman.
Right, I agree. I think the Young Turks misrepresenting multiple news stories in a racially charged manner, followed by telling viewers to violently escalate around police, directly inspired Gavin Long to do what he did. They were very clearly race baiting and encouraging their audience members to be violent. But here's the best part.
And now, you want to probably know what the Young Turks' response was to all of this. Well, first, they copyright struck all of the reaction videos so that you can't actually go to Gavin Long's YouTube channel and see the Young Turks plastered all over there. So they copyright struck all of those channels. And then, are you ready for the real psycho twist? They said that he was probably a right-winger, even though they knew that he was a super fan of their rhetoric.
2 days after the shooting, the Young Turks memory hold the evidence that he was a fan and tried to blame Republicans by calling him a sovereign citizen or other titles that are associated with right-wing politics.
He was part of the New Freedom Group, apparently, an anti-government group. This is a group that is afraid of government power and is, yes, they're right-wing.
Now, this happened a while back, so you would think that the Young Turks would have learned their lesson and started to lower the temperature on the type of language that they use. But nope, a handful of years after this event, you can still find them promoting violence.
I know we're not supposed to, support violence, but hey, sometimes it's like punching a Nazi. You just got to get in there and, make it happen.
During this segment, she called the guy a terrorist at one point and then a Nazi during that clip who you should violently assault because he broke an LGBT sign that was near a mannequin of a child inside of a Target store. Gee, wouldn't it be awkward if there were examples of trans people destroying signs? Though I'm glad to see that the Young Turks has learned to calm down their rhetoric, considering, one of their fans committed a mass shooting after he was on camera directly repeating their violent messaging. But as bad as all this stuff is, along with the constant violent rhetoric from leftist media corporations and politicians, I think it's still surface level material because there's actually something far more nefarious going on here that is quite abstract but very effective at turning people into radicals. And to talk about that, let's go to a video made by a channel called The Second Story, where Hillary, the channel owner, talks about what I think is the deliberate dumbing down of American kids through the education system.
According to the PIAAC, over 25% of adults in America score at or below level 1 literacy. Go ahead and rewind that if you need to, but let me say that one more time. Over 25% of American adults cannot read above kindergarten literacy, and that number is growing.
Now, let's just sort these stats out by race because I don't care if people say they're offended by reality, and look, I think we found an issue that no one is shocked by. It would be horrible if someone pointed out that 44% of Hispanics and 50% of black people cannot read above a kindergarten level, which is 3 times their white counterparts. If I were a black or Hispanic parent, I would be furious about this.
Let's look at level 2. This level is important to our discussion because based on my own assessment, most published authors today are probably at this level. I personally would call this 3rd or 4th grade literacy. This group makes up about 29% of the population. Combined with level 1, these two groups account for almost 60% of American adults. Over half of American adults cannot read above a basic 3rd or 4th grade level and can only analyze what they've read in a limited sense.
Oh, this makes so much sense. So more than half of Americans are basically illiterate when it comes to handling text more difficult than Harry Potter, which means when it comes to complex issues like the economy or politics, they're too dumb to read about it. Oh wait, it says that Harry Potter is a 4th to 6th grade reading level. Harry Potter might even be too difficult.
Closely related to this study is this article from The Atlantic. The author spoke to a number of university professors and several students and found that professors have had to adjust their expectations of their students. English lit majors can no longer be expected to read whole assigned books, but have to content themselves with assigned passages of books. Several of these college students, these young adults, have arrived on campus unaware that reading whole books would be required of them. Several told their teachers that they didn't know how to read a whole book.
Let me repeat that. English literature professors at a number of good colleges can't assign books that they used to be able to assign, like Crime and Punishment, because students can't read a full book. Look, I'm not going to pretend that some of this isn't due to diversity quotas in the prior statistics that I showed, but I also think the reason that those stats exist is because of a change in how reading is taught that is designed to make you stupid and therefore easy to manipulate. To address this, Hillary spends a lot of her video talking about critical literacy education and about the differences between phonics and whole language learning, which are different methods of teaching kids how to read. To put it simply, phonics is the correct way to teach people how to read, and whole language learning is retarded. When you're taught phonics, you break down words into their individual parts and use pattern recognition to figure out what words are being used in a text. So if I'm 6 years old and I look at this word here, I'm going to use the pronunciation rules by saying cat and say, oh, well, that's how you spell cat. With whole language learning, you just kind of memorize each word individually based on how it looks, which is completely stupid, and I did not fail to see how this method is not only highly inefficient, but it also stifles critical thinking skills, as kids have to wait until they're told how words are pronounced, instead of being able to accurately predict how to say new words based on patterns that they've learned.
I'm 27 years old in a corporate job, and I do not know how to spell. Okay? Because I'm from the generation where I'm in 5th grade, and I had a laptop with spell check on it. So now I'm 27 years old, listening to podcasts on how to sound out words and how to spell, because I don't know how. Mind you, I'm educated. I have a bachelor's, and I cannot spell.
Yeah, it's almost like that was deliberate. It's not the computer, it's the teaching methods. I grew up on spell checkers too, and I can spell without them because I was taught phonics as a kid. Now, all of this might kind of seem abstract to some of you in the audience, but trust me, as sort of like a language enthusiast, this shit infuriates me. By that, I mean that it's basically child abuse to teach kids something as inefficient as whole language, because it puts them way behind kids who learn phonics, and it doesn't work when you get to more complex words. For the sake of brevity, I will say that it should be obvious to anybody who has studied language or foreign languages that engaging in pattern recognition by memorizing a handful of simple rules along with the exceptions is far more efficient than individually memorizing how to read the 20 or so thousand words that the average adult knows.
Now cue this paper. What they did was they invented a whole new language script. So a bunch of squiggles and lines that when stacked together could form words. And they had different groups of students learn how to read this language. The only difference is right at the beginning, group 1 was told to focus their attention on the word as a whole, use the image as a whole to try and make sense of it. Whereas group 2 was told to focus on the individual units within each image. And what happens? Well, after training, each group was tested on what they learned during their training. And it turns out that when they were quizzed on words that they had seen during the training phase, the whole word reading group performed a little bit better than the group focused on the individual letters. But here's the fun bit. When both groups were tested on new words, words they hadn't seen during their training phase, it turned out the whole word group suffered incredibly. In fact, they performed no better than chance. They were just essentially guessing. Whereas the individual unit group did significantly better. They were able to take words they'd never seen before and read them just fine.
Kids who are not taught pronunciation rules through phonics basically do not have the tools to figure out how to say words they haven't already memorized, which can triple, quadruple, or quintuple the time that it takes to read, so it's no wonder young people these days feel unequipped to read an entire book. And the reason I'm calling this child abuse is because the ability to read quickly and comprehend what you read is a fundamental part of skill building, which means that whole language learning straight up cripples your ability to build a skill valuable enough to get a good job. Do you know what kinds of people do violent and radical shit? People who don't have good jobs. But if you aren't already mad, here's where it starts to get worse.
I want to first talk about this study from just last year, 2024. This highly talked about study wasn't just assessing the literacy of the average American, but of the average English literature major at 2 widely respected state universities. The study participants were instructed to read the first 7 paragraphs of Bleak House by Charles Dickens, and then translate what they read into modern language, thereby demonstrating their understanding of the text. What they found was that 58% of the study's participants were at about level 1 literacy or slightly higher, which the study categorizes as problematic.
Let me repeat that. She's saying that more than half of the university students who are English majors from that study are reading at a kindergarten/first grade level. Now, I'm not going to lie, the first 7 paragraphs of Bleak House by Charles Dickens is quite a difficult read. But the point was not for the study participants to be able to flawlessly know every word written in the text. The point was to assess critical thinking skills, knowledge of the structure of language, and most importantly, their ability and willingness to look up words or references they didn't understand. 58% of the college English majors did that on the level of like a first grader. Welcome to modern education. The results were depressing, as almost nobody in the study could accurately describe what was going on in the first few paragraphs. Nor did they have the willingness to look things up they didn't know.
They understood so little of the introduction to Bleak House that they would not be able to read the novel on their own. However, these same subjects also believed they would have no problem reading the rest of the 900-page novel. I want to make one thing very clear here. No one is mocking these students' lack of vocabulary knowledge. I have to look up words I don't know all the time when I'm reading. The biggest and most significant factor here, at least to me, is that these college undergrads didn't even bother doing that. They had permission to look up anything they didn't know, and they just didn't bother. They felt they knew the meaning, assumed they were right, and moved on. English majors at a major university.
They took society's best. English majors in college from respected universities, and they still couldn't read an author who used to be mandatory for high schoolers. This study took place in 2015, conveniently during the time that everything started going woke, and this was around 2 or 3 decades after the whole language learning model got implemented, so this would be the first generation going to college under that system. Not to say that everyone got whole language education. I was taught phonics despite being a kid during the first generation of the whole language model, but for the ones who are unfortunate enough to be taught in this way, we know this stuff is ridiculous and ineffective, just like Common Core math. Well, maybe it's incorrect for me to say that. Maybe the whole language model actually is very effective at its intended purpose. Let's get to the part about critical literacy.
Critical literacy is the new literacy. Critical literacy aims to teach not literacy, but rather a kind of social awareness, which was using teaching reading as a delivery method of sorts, as if reading was just the syringe and this right kind of social awareness was the real thing they wanted the child to receive. One of the beginning strategies for teaching literacy with whole language, according to this manual, is the use of generative themes. You remember that one?
She's saying remember that because earlier in the video she talks about generative words, which are described as keywords in a text like rice or slum or wealth, used to suggest social themes around which consciousness can be raised. These words are used to evoke an emotional response in the reader. The core tenet of critical literacy is to engage with how certain generative words make you feel, as opposed to what those words actually mean. Anyway, pay close attention because here's the evil that this whole thing has been leading up to.
Which all boils down to the most important thing about reading is learning the correct way to interpret a text, which, by the way, has nothing to do with the author's intent and is heavily reliant on your feelings. I mean, think about how so many people these days latch onto specific words and then spin out because those words trigger them in some way. That's because those words are generative words, which fit into generative themes, which are taught to them in a way specifically intended to trigger their emotional analysis. These people can't listen to reason at that point. They see the word and the programmed reaction is triggered, and that's it. That's what critical literacy produces, specifically and intentionally.
She's saying that students are being trained to notice certain trigger words that should elicit an emotional analysis or emotional reaction to how that word makes you feel, outside of its intended meaning or dictionary definition. And Hillary gives some familiar examples of generative words that you might hear on a regular basis later in the video. So it's all being said here is that they purposefully teach you an inefficient reading technique that makes it take like 5 times longer to read a book than someone who is taught phonics, which basically makes those kids not want to read or educate themselves when they get older. In fact, it locks them out of a lot of skill development. That same whole language reading technique also makes it incredibly difficult to figure out words that you don't know, so it limits your vocabulary and ability to accurately communicate. And then they teach you a bunch of Russian sleeper agent trigger words that will cause you to go into a frenzy anytime they're said. Is this why so many idiots are running around calling everyone they don't like a fascist without actually knowing what that word means? Is this why a section of the population flips out anytime the word Trump is said? Is it because they were taught critical literacy for 12 years and then they were given the trigger words in college?
I actually find it hysterical how a lot of Republicans and Trump supporters like to say that colleges and universities brainwash their students to be liberal, when it's like, have they ever just stopped to think that maybe that people that graduate college and are educated with a degree are more likely to lean liberal because they're smarter?
Right. But I mean, this method is so effective at creating brain-rotted idiots that Portland, Oregon, one of the wokest cities in America, just acquitted a black man with priors of stabbing a white man because the white man called him the N-word after he was stabbed. Unbelievable. This is a real article, not The Onion. They said it was self-defense because the white man was racist, but if you read the details, it was obviously not self-defense. Outside of that, this video from The Second Story on critical literacy education is diabolical, and it's probably one of the best videos that I've watched this year. I would very much recommend watching the whole thing. But now we can understand how people like, say, Hasan Piker come into prominence. Actually, let's talk about that because the next key component of radicalizing a population is to install degenerate role models into media for the population to emulate because commoners will largely follow what popular people do. That's why things like celebrity endorsements work. So if all the popular people are good, then you'll get more good people. But if all the popular people are degenerates, then you're going to get a lot more degenerates. The Boondocks was famous for criticizing them for doing this to the black community, and very literally painted the BET network as a television channel designed to destroy blacks.
And there's plenty of science out there to support the idea that human beings form a lot of their moral opinions by ingesting fiction, especially at younger ages.
Right. A lot of people love refusing to admit this, but you do become the media that you consume, and you do become the average of the people that you associate with. So choose carefully because you will do this whether you are consciously aware of it or not. With that said, Hasan Piker is basically the leader of the modern left when it comes to the online space. And by that, I mean the part of the left that is increasingly pushing out reasonable people and becoming more radical. So there are tons of people who are modeling Hasan's behavior. And what kind of behavior is that?
Well, my understanding is that the property owners who have properties there choose just not to rent it at all.
Yeah, kill them. Kill those motherfuckers and murder those motherfuckers in the street. Let the streets
Let the streets soak in their fucking red capitalist bloods, dude.
Wow, that sounds a lot like the rhetoric that we heard from the Young Turks. After seeing this, would anyone be shocked if I told them that Hasan had a multi-millionaire horse enthusiast uncle who owns the Young Turks, gave him a job right out of college, and mentored him? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And what kind of person would think it's morally okay to openly encourage murder to a large audience? Well, maybe it's a person who abuses his pets by making them sit in the corner for 4 hours straight like a stage prop, and then shocking her with maximum voltage if she tries to move.
Kaya, please just fucking go. Just stop. Jesus Christ, what are you doing? You're being such a baby.
Oh, come on, Kaya. I didn't even shock you that hard. You're such a baby. This is what every abuser says after they hit someone. Come on, I didn't even hit you that hard. There are tons of examples out there where Hasan is abusing animals. You can find numerous clips of it on Twitter. And I do find the amount of creators who ran cover for him doing this to be quite disgusting.
Kaya is the most loved and spoiled and the most well-trained and best little baby or big baby that I have ever been around. You would think that this kind of outrage, we would have seen it towards like the genocide and stuff, but
how can you care about a dog when a genocide is going on? Don't you know there's a genocide? Ignore all the bad stuff I'm doing because of Palestine. I think she underestimates how much Americans like dogs. Hasan is never going to live this one down. It's so popular that even the vice president brought it up.
He has this command place, which is basically if I snap my finger and point, he will run to that place and lay down.
You don't have to zap him.
No. Not like Hasan Piker, no. If you mistreat dogs, that's almost 100% sign that you're going to be a really terrible person.
And last, for the purposes of this video and showing the kind of role model he is, Hasan loves taking credit for moral behavior that he didn't actually participate in. For those of you who aren't aware, YouTuber Ethan Klein got tired of being harassed by Hasan and his fan base because they were like making false reports to the CPS, trying to get his kids taken away. And Twitch and other social media platforms have done nothing to mitigate this, despite it being against the rules. So when 3 Hasan Piker orbiters who were harassing Ethan stole his content, Ethan filed a lawsuit. Because these 3 people were broke and he is rich, Hasan made it seem like he was going to financially help these 3 girls who have supported him behind the scenes. Well, he didn't.
Oh, socialist, why won't he give these guys money? Trust me, if I offer support, you won't know about it, okay?
I also want to make clear that I did not receive any support, financial or otherwise, from Hasan Piker. Hasan never even reached out to me privately to offer words of support. Speaking honestly, I found his indifference to my suffering hurtful, especially after he hinted he might help me behind the scenes. It felt like he wanted to receive credit from the public for him helping me without providing any.
He pretends to help them as he throws them in the trash and spends all his money on gambling. Though, as it is sort of the theme of this video, I don't think there's anything grassroots about Hasan's success at all. Hasan was basically installed into his position, yet he wants people to think that he was some go-getter kid who grew up in the school of hard knocks, instead of the reality, which is that he grew up extremely rich and was handed everything.
You guys probably know this, but if you don't, my uncle has a YouTube channel called The Young Turks. It was like a 26-person shop. It was like a tiny operation, not that big, not that media behemoth or anything. So I was like, yeah, I'll just go work with him, do an internship with him, and I'll live in LA.
26 employees? What kind of YouTube channel has that much staff? I mean, I'm at 1 million subs and I still do everything by myself. Not to mention that the Young Turks started off with millions of dollars of venture capitalist money. They're about as grassroots as the Daily Wire. So Hasan was handed a $60,000 a year job right out of college in like 2013. A lot of his fans were like 5 at the time, so I don't think they know how huge the Young Turks used to be back in the early 2010s. He's trying to minimize their influence, but make no mistake, this was a huge opportunity.
I was dead broke and was critiquing capitalism, and then people would be like, yeah, because you're a fucking loser. And now that I have money and I still do it, people are like, well, hypocrite much?
Most of us YouTubers have to learn this stuff on our own, as opposed to being mentored by a multi-millionaire former legacy media pundit with a huge media corporation by comparison to what other creators have. Then there was the move to Twitch, where he not only gained a lot of his popularity by outright pirating Gordon Ramsay shows, but Hasan pretty regularly violates their community guidelines and has committed far more serious violations than a number of people who I know who have been permanently banned off that platform, yet he doesn't get in trouble. Not only is Hasan given protection that other creators don't get, But the CEO of Twitch constantly glazes him, even after Hasan continuously tries to push for people in his audience to kill his political opponents. The most recent example is this moment here.
And Destiny and Asmongold and Dan Saltman, whose addresses are all readily available in the same exact websites and platforms that they rely on, that their fan bases go to find my address, to harass me.
This is like the 4th time that Hasan has doxed people on his stream, yet there's no ban for it. Like I said, he was installed into power. They don't ban him for a reason. Oh, but technically he didn't say the addresses. Yeah, all he did was say all of his enemies' addresses are public and not that hard to find in front of an audience that is very politically radical. I mean, we watched one of these types kill Charlie Kirk, followed by tons of them saying, why not more? Hasan's audience is so radical that he couldn't even denounce a political assassination. Hasan knows the types of people he's saying this to, and he's helping his audience figure out where his opponents live so they can go hurt them. Because Asmongold is a fascist Nazi, right? As you guys say, it's not wrong to punch Nazis. Seriously, I don't know how it's legal for one of the biggest streamers to openly encourage his audience to assault people. The laws have to change. This has to stop. But Twitch allows this stuff because, like I said, Hasan's career is astroturfed. He was installed into power. He didn't earn it on his own, and he doesn't have to play by the same rules as everyone else, especially considering that Twitch banned a ton of his competition from the platform. But why is Twitch doing this, you ask? Well, it's because it's run by people who hate America, and Hasan is a major proponent of preaching anti-American values, as he regularly promotes and advocates for America's political enemies.
Is there a country that's done socialism the way that you like?
If ultimately the point of government is to improve the material conditions of all people, I would say China is probably the closest. And there are still plenty of failures within the Chinese system as well, plenty of issues within the Chinese system as well. But that's probably the closest, I would say, to an example that we should follow and lessons that we should learn from.
China? You mean the country that had communist values that were so great that they used them to kill tens of millions of their own people? That's what we should follow? I'm not sure if this interview was recorded before or after Hasan spent like a week or two glazing the hell out of China and soy-facing over a copy of Mao's Little Red Book.
Oh, no way! It's a small one.
And it's the first version.
It's the first. Wait.
Yeah.
Really? Is that a Bible?
No, that's the Little Red Book.
It is basically.
The Little Red Book?
The Little Red Book.
It's the Red Bible is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some may say more important than the Bible.
That's crazy.
This is like soy-facing over a first edition copy of Mein Kampf.
You have met me at a very Chinese time in my life, chat. In my conscience, I have already become Chinese. Okay? We were already white Chinese in this chat. I've already become full Chinese.
Okay, so Hasan is white now. And China is so great that he almost got arrested for a meme on his phone. But at this point, I've watched enough of his content to know that he is basically a foreign agent whose sole purpose is to destroy American values. I mean, he lies constantly. You don't even have to understand politics to see that. Just watch the dog shocking saga. He got caught doing that shit red-handed with undeniable evidence, yet he has still taken no accountability. He continues to gaslight his audience, and now he pretends to play it off as a joke. By the way, if you're in his audience, he is incessantly lying to you because he thinks you're stupid, and he hates you.
Your understanding of white supremacy is so juvenile, it's infuriating.
It's because I am a white supremacist. I'm moving to the white supremacist town, okay? That's why. I'm a white supremacist. I'm white. Shut the fuck up! You're so fucking stupid. I hate all of you! I hate the woke! I hate woke! I hate the left! I hate the woke! I'm crashing out because I can't fucking stand losers like you!
What are you talking about, man? This is your average viewer. This is the type of guy that you were encouraging to show up at Asmongold's house. Outside of this, what do I mean by foreign agent? Well, Hasan is not American.
I don't have any sort of patriotism in my heart for any, for America, but just in general. I am not even remotely nationalistic by any measure. I don't care about those sorts of things.
Yeah, no shit. So Hasan is not American. He's from Turkey. He grew up there and was raised as a Muslim.
I'm Turkish. I grew up in Turkey. My whole family lives in Turkey still, with some exceptions.
But then you might ask, how is he legally in America? He's from Turkey, but he's been living here for like 15 years. Well, here's how he did that.
I was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and my parents wanted to do that so that I would have an American citizenship, so that one day I could be the president. That second part's not true, but I then immediately was
shipped back off to Turkey.
I don't see how this doesn't count as immigration fraud. They dipped his toes into the waters of America so he could have citizenship, and immediately shipped him back to Turkey so he would grow up Turkish. Then, when he became an adult, they shipped him off to a rich college. He gets trained in media through nepotism, and then he continuously promotes anti-American values and domestic terrorism when he goes off on his own. How is this legal? It's time to change the 14th Amendment because it's out of date, and it was ratified in the 1800s before mass transit existed. It's time to bring it up to modern standards. It's time to copy places like Japan that say that you can't become a citizen by birth unless one of your parents is a citizen. That's how it should be everywhere. Anchor babies like Hasan, who has encouraged his audience numerous times to murder Americans, should not be allowed to live here. There's a reason why people who weren't born in America can't become president, and there's a reason why when you get naturalized as a U.S. citizen, you have to swear allegiance to the country. It's so we don't give voting power to foreign agent stochastic terrorists like Hasan.
I mean, I get called a terrorist every day.
Well, you are a terrorist, so that would be an accurate accusation. Stochastic terrorist sounds like a big word, but basically it just means that you're a media figure who purposefully riles up your audience into violent ideology, followed by saying things like, hey, maybe someone should go assault some police officers or some ICE agents. This describes a shocking number of leftist pundits, such as Hasan or members of the Young Turks. Again, the fact that there are no legal punishments for this is insane.
That's the strategy every single time. It's misrepresent, slander, and then hopefully someone in your audience goes to kill him.
Right. Just like Uncle Chank, you call your political opponents Nazi fascist, you have your news organization say it's okay to assault them over and over again, and then you just hope the rest works itself out over time. Now, what's also insane is the last part that's making people violent, which is that more and more Americans and people in other Western countries are being forced to share space with some of the most violent and abusive people, and nothing is being done to stop them. One of the most recent examples of this happened at TwitchCon, where a streamer, Emiru, was doing a meet and greet and was sexually assaulted.
I see out of the corner of my eye, there's a guy walking around the side of the meet and greet, and then he walks up to me, he grabs my face, and he leans in and lips puckered tries to kiss me, and I start screaming. Twitch's security is like nowhere near me, nor to be found. I can see them, but they don't do anything. My security jumps up and shoves the guy away from me and is like, get the fuck out of here. And he's allowed to walk away and leave. No one in Twitch staff came up to me to like see what was going on.
This whole story is a huge rabbit hole with failures on Twitch's part that were so horrendous that any rational person would assume they were trying to encourage this behavior. Not only did Twitch provide almost no security, not only did they let the guy who assaulted Emiru get away, but they did everything they could to try to cover this up after it happened. By the way, this was 3 hours into the convention. It was right at the start. And thanks to Twitter being the least censored platform on social media, someone uploaded evidence of this event and it went viral.
I'll just start this by saying, shout out to the guy who filmed it and put it on Twitter. Thank God someone was filming, because otherwise I don't think Twitch would have said anything.
Another Twitter success story, but get this. Twitch didn't just fail to apprehend the guy. Apparently he was a streamer, and their initial response before they were called out was to slap him on the wrist with a 30-day ban. Also this.
You want to know the worst part? Emiru had a security guard 2 years ago that attended TwitchCon, where another fan was attempting to sexually assault her, and the security guard stopped him. But because Twitch official head staff didn't agree with the way that he stopped him, which by the way was just him putting his hands on him and making it to where he couldn't leave while the police arrived, they permanently banned him from ever being a part of TwitchCon again. So the security guard that did their job to make sure that Emmy was safe was banned.
God forbid you do your job as a bodyguard, you'll get banned from TwitchCon. God forbid you say that men shouldn't be in women's sports, Twitch will ban you for life for that. But if you sexually assault someone on camera, you get a slap on the wrist, 1 month ban.
I asked them, like, what are they gonna do about this? And you know what they said initially? They said, oh, well, he's banned from the platform for 30 days. What? No one gives a fuck if he's banned on Twitch or not.
And this isn't the only time that Twitch has essentially levied no punishment for this kind of behavior. Twitch regularly ignores criminal or dangerous activity on its platform. The safety and security of all those attending TwitchCon is our highest priority. No, it's not. That's a straight up lie. In fact, they were so negligent that I think it's no longer safe for any creator to attend TwitchCon in the future.
Some people at Twitch and Amazon watching right now, please just listen. Like, people aren't saying this for no reason. Like, I feel like you guys don't get it or something. Like, I could have literally been stabbed yesterday. Literally, like...
Right, she could have been stabbed. Sexual assault is bad, but the real danger is that someone could have easily ended her life that day. So it makes me a little uncomfortable seeing this happen at a Twitch event, especially when Twitch, as a platform that's owned by Amazon, is at the forefront of radicalizing people into this type of behavior.
Twitch, you're fucking with the wrong people, and you're promoting the wrong people. Genuinely. And it's at this level that I have to assume that what you're doing is intentional.
I've said this a ton of times in my recent content, and I'm going to keep saying it because it's important. We need to make sure that criminals go to jail for committing crimes, and this kind of rhetoric has to stop.
The way that prisons are set up in our society, I would argue that they do not work. They do not make us safer. The instinct is to just take that person, the source of that harm, the source of that issue, and then just throw them away. Put them in a cage and throw away the key. That doesn't address the reason why that harm was created in the first place. A lot of times, people who create trauma for others are those who themselves went through trauma earlier in their own lives.
Right.
And I bring all of this up to say that, you know, again, like when we talk about policing, I don't think the system actually makes us safer. I think what it does is it just removes problems out of view.
Right, and it turns out when you quarantine violent people away from polite society, they can't commit crimes. Sure, they might go right back to committing crimes the second they get out, but at least you get like a 2 to 5 year cooldown period where they can't victimize anyone, and that in itself lowers crime rates. It also reduces the number of future criminals because, as he said, hurt people, and the less people you let them victimize, the fewer future criminals there will be. At the very least, keeping them out of jail doesn't work either.
And this is exactly what happens when you don't lock up criminals, when you don't punish people who deserve to be punished. They get more and more bold and more people suffer.
I don't really have any sympathy for people who repeatedly choose to commit heinous crimes. Sure, I think it would be great to improve mental health services and try to give some of these people a second chance, but personally, I think a lot of these people can't be rehabilitated because they don't feel like what they're doing is wrong. And it's not fair to force polite society to deal with them because you have empathy for the local homeless guy who likes to randomly punch women. I think people like Mamdani and these judges who keep letting career criminals back on the streets are liars, and the actual reason that they're letting criminals go is to make society more violent. Not enforcing the law is a radicalization technique because it traumatizes more people who will then grow up to be criminals, and it forces polite people to live in a PvP zone where they now have to be violent just to survive. Outside of that, let's go back to the phonics talk. The worst part of the study about the Charles Dickens book was not that they couldn't understand the text. The worst part is that they thought they could understand it, and because of that, they put no effort into fact-checking to make sure they were correct. I cannot understate how much this kind of hubris ruins people's lives. Moreover, I'm really disturbed by government standards that think it's more important to teach you how to calculate the hypotenuse of a triangle than to teach you how compound interest works so that you don't become a debt slave. And what ends up happening is that you know a lot of stuff which makes you feel smart, but none of that stuff that you know is actually useful. So intellectually, you're no better than the average burger flipper despite doing all this work to finish high school or college. Worse, you have no idea how to tier information based on how useful it is, so even if you do self-study, you'll just start wasting time on crap that does not matter. I think the funniest example that I've seen personally is people who try to learn Japanese only from anime. They'll spend countless hours memorizing words like Demon Lord or Quirkless instead of words they will actually use like bathroom or train. If you want to know how people can learn multiple languages when you can't even learn one, it's because the people who know a lot of languages know how to prioritize high-value words and grammar, and they know all the most efficient learning techniques. Public school is not really good at teaching that, and the downside is that if you don't know how to prioritize the higher value information, and if you don't know how to learn efficiently, you will be locked out of the higher levels of skill development, which looks a lot like getting paid less in the job market when you become an adult. It's not your fault that you were taught this way, but it is your responsibility to fix it. And if you do fix it, you'll find yourself doing a lot of stuff that you never thought you could do. Anyway, thanks for watching, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.